You keep chasing change, but nothing sticks because your habits haven't. Success isn't built on motivation, it's built on repetition. If you wake up doing the same things, you'll keep living the same life. But the moment you take control of your daily patterns, everything begins to shift. Your future is hidden in your routine. Shift your habits with intention, and you'll unlock a version of yourself you've never met before. In a few moments, I will teach you how changing small daily habits can completely transform your mindset, direction, and entire life. You become what you repeatedly do. You are not the sum of your intentions, you are the sum of your actions. Not once, not twice, but the actions you repeat without fail day in and day out. You may think your life is determined by big decisions, but it is the small invisible habits that shape your destiny. A man doesn't wake up successful. He becomes successful through a quiet ritual of repeated behavior, thoughts, words, movements that sculpt his mind and mold his results. But why do so many fail to see this? Because habit disguises itself as routine. You stop noticing the very thing that's shaping your outcomes. You rise late, put things off, speak words of doubt, then wonder why success feels like it belongs to someone else. It isn't fate, it isn't luck. It's your pattern, a habit you've rehearsed into permanence. So, how do you turn the wheel? You begin by observing. Begin your mornings with intention. Instead of drifting, choose. Choose action over excuse. Choose focus over noise. Choose to build, to refine, to grow. Find to grow. Replace one small habit, just one. Do it every day, not once a week. Let it become your new default. Imagine this. You rise before the sun. You speak words of power, not complaint. You write down your goals, not once, but each day. How long before the world begins to bend in your favor? Not long, because your habits write your story even when you're not paying attention. So I ask you, what have you been rehearsing lately? Fear or faith, delay or discipline? Because what you do consistently, you become permanently. Choose wisely. Small disciplines build great fortunes. Greatness is not built in a moment. It is carved, chiseled, refined in silence. A man becomes powerful not by dreaming of power, but by repeating small acts of discipline so consistently that they become his nature. Discipline is not about punishment. It is the gatekeeper of liberty. It is what separates those who live on purpose from those who live by accident. You may wonder why bother with the small things, because the small things are the big things in disguise. The way you rise, the way you speak to yourself, the way you do your work, even when no one is watching in itself. These habits decide the size of your results. Begin by mastering the first hour of your day. Not when the day gets busy, but before it begins. Make your bed with precision. Read something that strengthens the mind. Train the body. Speak your goals aloud. These aren't chores. They are declarations. Each act says, I am in command. Imagine a man who keeps his word to himself, who never lets fatigue speak louder than purpose, who each morning does what others won't over time. Who will succeed? The one who works in flashes, or the one who builds like a mason brick by brick? Now ask yourself, what small discipline have you been avoiding? That's your next door to power. Walk through it, thoughts become habits, and habits shape fate. You must understand that your thinking is not neutral. It is a forge. Every thought you rethought, you repeat, hardens into belief. And every belief, if unexamined, becomes habit. Most men never rise because they never change the way they think. They hold on to doubts, fears, and tiny visions and wonder why life offers them nothing more. But consider this, your mind is not meant to drift. It is meant to be driven. You can either fill it with thoughts that build you or thoughts that bind you. The choice is always yours, yet few make it deliberately. You shift your destiny when you shift your dominant thoughts. Write them, speak them, think them until they push out the poison of doubt. Say to yourself, I am capable. I am committed. I am becoming. Not once, but constantly until the voice of weakness fades and strength becomes natural. Imagine you're building a mansion. Would you lay bricks of fear and doubt? Or would you build with faith, vision, and courage? Your thoughts are the mortar of your future. Handle them with care. What have you been thinking when no one is looking? That's your true direction. Change it and everything follows. Success is found in daily ritual, not occasional effort. Success is not a thunderclap. It is a whisper repeated through ritual. The men who build empires, fortunes, and legacies do not rely on moods or sudden bursts of energy. They build ritual, sacred patterns of action that produce predictable excellence. You've likely seen men who start strong, who sprint and then stumble. They rely on willpower, but willpower fades. Ritual remains. It carries you through fatigue, through boredom, through setback. It becomes who you are. But why is ritual so powerful? Because it doesn't ask your permission. Once formed, it acts automatically. It removes the friction between intention and execution. Ritual turns dreams into duties and duties into reality. You build a ritual by anchoring it to something sacred. Morning, evening meals. Attach an action to a moment, repeat it. Respect it. Protect it. Let no excuse pierce it. Picture this. A man wakes before the town stirs. He lights a candle. He writes down 10 goals. He visualizes their completion. He lifts his body with effort. He repeats a sentence of power every day without fail. Will he not over time separate himself from the masses? So what are you doing each day without fail? That's your ritual. Is it building you or breaking you? Purpose fuels habits that last. A man who truly knows why he wakes up each morning does not need motivation. He embodies it. He does not shrink before pain, failure, or fatigue because his soul burns brighter than any obstacle. Purpose is not just a goal. It is the engine behind every action, the invisible fire that turns discipline from a burden into a form of worship. Without it, even the best habits wither. A man can force himself to run for a few days, rise early for a week, or grind for a month. But without purpose, he will eventually stop because there is no reason to continue. Now look around you. Watch how people live. Most move mechanically, drifting from one habit to another, mimicking what they see online, copying routines they do not understand, chasing results they don't even want. They scroll through other people's lives, hoping something will click in theirs. They wake up without clarity. They work without direction. They chase pleasure because they lack something more permanent. They do not fail because they are weak. They fail because they are not anchored. They lack purpose, and purpose cannot be inherited. It is not something anyone can give you. No book can hand it to you. No mentor can define it for you. You must decide it. You must write it. You must look into your own soul and say, this is why I am here. And once you do, you must return to it daily, morning after morning, night after night, not as a reminder, but as a ritual. The man who lives this way becomes unshakable, because when your habits are tied to your purpose, they transform. They are no longer duties, they are devotions. You no longer force yourself to stay focused. Distraction begins to feel like disrespect to your own destiny. You no longer need tricks to wake up early. Your vision wakes you before the sun. You no longer wrestle with consistency. Your identity demands it. So how do you find this purpose? You stop the noise. You sit in stillness. You ask, what was I made to contribute? You experiment with action. You write down goals, not for approval, but for alignment. Then you watch which of them stirs your spirit. Which ones make you move without pressure? That's your clue. Purpose is felt before it's understood. And once you sense it, you must build habits to honor it every single day. Imagine this. Catch that. A man digging for gold. Many dig out of curiosity, but one dig because he knows the gold is there. He's seen it in his dream. He's felt it in his bones. His hands do not tire because his heart is convinced. And that's the difference. Conviction. So now ask yourself honestly, what are your habits serving? Are they tied to something real or are they floating? If you don't know the answer, then the time to discover it is now. Once you connect your actions to your mission, everything else aligns. Pain becomes fuel. Time becomes sacred. Time becomes sacred. And your life begins to move with force. Your environment reflects your standards. Take a close look around you, not with casual eyes, but with the gaze of a man ready to rise. Observe the space you wake up in, the desk you sit at, the items you see every day, the people whose voices fill your hours. These are not coincidences. They are reflections, quiet, constant reflections of the standard you hold yourself to internally. A man does not need to speak of his values. His surroundings do the talking. His room, his tools, his schedule, his circle, all of it whispers or shouts his identity. Yet how many live in chaos and confusion, pretending it has no consequence? They wake up late, surrounded by clutter, their homes are neglected, their plans disorganized. They tolerate drama, laziness, and distraction in the people closest to them, and then ask why their life feels heavy, stuck just short of momentum. But life is always speaking. The results they're getting are not a mystery, they are a mirror. When you permit disorder in your environment, you send a signal to your mind. This is acceptable. This is what I deserve. And that quiet signal shapes your entire attitude. But when you demand more, when you clean with discipline, when you organize with intention, when you protect your peace from toxic influence, you begin to rise, not just externally, but internally. You reinforce an identity of excellence. You begin to feel like someone who deserves more because you act like someone who does. So, how do you raise this standard? You begin by confronting your environment with honesty. Audit your space, touch everything. Ask yourself, does this serve who I'm becoming? And if the answer is no, remove it without guilt, without delay. Whether it's an old item, a sloppy habit, or a person whose energy pulls you down, let it go. You're not throwing it away. You're making room for what belongs. Build a space that aligns with your vision. Design a daily flow that respects your time. Surround yourself with people who sharpen your thinking and challenge your weakness, not those who comfort your excuses. This is not about being perfect. It's about being intentional. Imagine a warrior preparing for battle. Would he trust a dull blade? Would he walk into the storm with his armor scattered, his camp in disarray? Of course not. He would treat his environment like a reflection of his future. Everything in order, every tool in place, every person beside him chosen for strength, loyalty, and clarity. This is how you must begin to live. Not by accident, but by design. So ask yourself with real courage, what have I allowed to remain that weakens me? It could be an object, a habit, a person, a mindset. Success is not only shaped by what you do, but by where you do it and with whom. The man who builds his environment with care builds a mind and a life that is impossible to shake. Repetition rewires the mind. The mind does not bend to brute force. It does not yield to a single act of willpower or a burst of sudden motivation. It responds to rhythm. It rewires through consistency, through the steady drumbeat of repetition. You cannot force your way into a new life in one dramatic leap. The mind is not a machine to be flipped into gear. It is a living field, one that must be cultivated with care, patience, and rhythm. You must till the soil of your thinking day after day until it begins to grow something new, and then tend to it until it blooms. This is where most men fall short. They begin with fire but no fuel. They start a new habit, try a new mindset, speak a new affirmation, and when it doesn't yield instant results, they walk away. It didn't work. They say as if change were a vending machine. But the mind doesn't respond to intensity. It responds to repetition. The brain is not looking for what is powerful. It's looking for what is familiar. And repetition creates that familiarity slowly, steadily, unshakably. Think of the first time you said something powerful to yourself. I am strong or I will change. It felt foreign, false even. Your doubt argued. Your old beliefs laughed. But that's not a sign of failure. It's a sign that your old programming is still in control. You don't defeat it by debating. You defeat it by outnumbering it. One truth repeated 1,000 times can drown out a lie you've believed for 20 years. It doesn't happen because you win the argument in your head. It happens because you rewrite the script. This is why your habits matter, not because of their intensity, but because of their rhythm. Wake up at the same time every day, not because it's hard, but because it's anchoring. Review your goals each morning, not because you forgot them, but because the repetition imprints them on your soul. Speak your affirmations, not as magic words, but as reminders to your brain of who you are becoming. Visualize the life you want, not to escape reality, but to program it into your nervous system as familiar. The goal is to get to a place where these truths feel so natural, so normal, that you cannot imagine life without them. Imagine a river carving its way through rock. It does not explode. It cuts through stone not by power, but by consistency. That is what you must become. Steady, daily, unwavering, not dramatic, but devoted. You win, not by force, but by rhythm. The rhythm of a man who has chosen what he wants to believe and is willing to repeat it until it becomes his nature. So the next time you feel stuck, discouraged, or impatient with your own progress, don't ask yourself, what's wrong with me? Ask a better question. Have I repeated the right things enough times? If the answer is no, then the solution is simple. Do not seek another secret. Do not chase a new method. Return to the rhythm. Speak it again. Train again. Visualize again. Wake up again until the new you isn't something you're trying to build. It's simply who you are. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Stop starting over. A man who keeps starting over becomes a man who never truly arrives. His life is a cycle fueled by bursts of energy stalled by waves of distraction. He gets inspired, takes the first step, maybe even a few more. Huh? But the moment it gets uncomfortable, inconvenient, or unexciting, he stops. Then he searches for something new to begin. A new plan, a new system, a new goal. He mistakes motion for progress. He confuses activity with direction. And so he spins not forward, but in place. You might tell yourself you lack discipline, that if only you had more willpower, you'd follow through. But often that's not the real issue. The deeper truth is a lack of commitment, not to the dream, but to the process. You begin things you believe in, but you don't stay with them long enough to see the reward. You plant a seed, then walk away the moment the soil doesn't give you instant fruit. You forget that every oak tree began as a buried seed, unseen, ignored, and slowly breaking through the ground. That requires patience. That requires presence. What if you didn't abandon the path this time? What if you resisted the temptation to switch directions just because it's hard or slow? What if instead of reaching for a new goal, you nurtured the one you already began? There's power in staying put. There's strength in consistency. And there's magic, real lasting magic in pushing through the invisible middle, that part no one sees. The part where nothing exciting happens, where it's all just repetition, routine, and silence. That's the forge where character is made. Most men never get there, not because they can't, but because they don't. They don't endure long enough. They don't let the process shape them. They think success is found in the spark, but it's built in the grind, in the quiet, uneventful, often thankless hours of persistence. The man who becomes great isn't always the most talented. He's often just the most committed. So, how do you stop quitting? You close the door on the idea of quitting altogether. You stop treating your habits like hobbies. You stop showing up only when it feels good. You make it a vow, a sacred promise to yourself. You do it when you're tired, when it's boring, when no one claps. You do it not for the reward, but because it is who you are now. Because your identity is no longer tied to starting, it's tied to finishing. Picture a bridge, strong at one end, but never completed. It stretches out beautifully, then stops midair. Useless. That's how many men's lives look. Like grand beginnings, flashy starts, but no destination reached. What does your bridge look like? Ah. Are you the man who lays every stone day after day, rain or shine, until the other side is crossed? Or are you just building in circles? Next time you feel the pull to chase something new, pause. Ask yourself, did I finish what I started? Or am I running from the hard part again? The middle is meant to test you. It's meant to separate the dreamers from the builders, the tourists from the travelers. You can start 100 things and still remain in the same place. Or you can finish just one and cross over into a life you've never known. Don't start over. Stay. Lay the next stone. The other side is waiting. Emotion follows motion. You've been taught that emotion must come first, that you must feel inspired before you act. Feel motivated before you begin. Feel ready before you commit. But that's a lie, a dangerous one, because emotion does not lead. It follows. It is not the driver of your life. It is the passenger. And if you wait for it to steer you, you'll sit idle while your dreams rot in the garage. The fastest way to change how you feel is to change what you do. Movement reshapes mindset. Action creates energy, not the other way around. You think the men who built empires, led nations, survived wars, and wrote masterpieces felt ready every morning? No, they moved anyway. They laced their boots, picked up the pen, gripped the sword before their minds gave them permission. And it's in that gap between resistance and action where true power is born. The man who waits to feel right before doing what is right will never lead a powerful life. He'll become a slave to his own mood. He'll tell himself, I'll start tomorrow. I'll begin when I'm in the zone. I'll train when I feel strong. I'll lead when I feel confident. But that man is not in control. His emotions are the puppeteer, and he'll spend his life wondering why nothing ever takes root. Meanwhile, the man of discipline understands a different law. He knows that mood is a servant, never a master. He does not check in with his feelings before he moves. He moves and his feelings adjust accordingly. This is the difference between those who rise and those who remain stuck. Greatness is never owned by the emotional. It is earned by the committed. So how do you use this? You build rituals that operate outside of your emotion. You design mornings, routines, decisions that are pre-committed. No thinking, just doing. You get out of bed before your mind offers excuses. You go for that walk before your brain begins to list reasons not to. You start writing before the perfect idea arrives. You start building while your confidence is still catching up. Because motion is the antidote to doubt. Every time you act without needing permission from your emotions, you prove to yourself who is in charge. Think of a fire. You want warmth, comfort, light, but you just sit there waiting to feel heat. You look at the wood. You dream about the blaze. You imagine how good it'll feel, but you never strike the match. You never crouch down and ignite the spark. And so you stay cold, miserable, full of potential, and empty of progress. Why? Because you waited for the feeling before you made the move. But warmth comes after the flame always. And it's not just fire. It's fitness. It's focus. It's faith. It's the book you haven't written, the business you haven't started, the apology you haven't made, the weight you haven't lost, the habit you haven't kept, the life you haven't lived. Not because you can't, but because you're still waiting to feel like doing it. But life doesn't reward the hesitant. It rewards the man who acts anyway. The man who moves forward in the fog. The man who takes the next step before clarity, before certainty, before comfort. You don't wait for momentum. You create it. You don't beg your emotions to obey. You train them to follow. And once they learn that you act no matter what, they begin to align. The inspiration comes, not at the start, but after. So now ask yourself honestly, what have you delayed because you didn't feel ready? Didn't feel ready. What project, habit, or responsibility are you waiting to feel right for? Stop waiting. Get up, begin. Do the thing not because you're inspired, but because you said you would. Let your body lead and let your emotions follow. That is how you become powerful. How you take command. That is how you finally move. Motion is your medicine. Take the first dose. Your words sculpt your reality. You speak your world into being whether you realize it or not. Every phrase you whisper when no one is listening. Every muttered complaint under your breath. Every quiet label you attach to yourself. These are the bricks. And with each one you're building, either a future of strength or a prison of limitation. Most men never see it happening. They speak without care, without thought, unaware that their tongue is crafting the boundaries of their life. No. A man says, I'm not good with money, and wonders why he never gains wealth. He mutters, I can't focus, and watches his attention weaken year after year. He jokes that he's lazy, undisciplined, unlucky, not the type to succeed. And though he laughs, his subconscious takes every word as law. What you repeat becomes a script, and what's rehearsed long enough eventually gets performed. You do not rise above the story you tell yourself. You grow into it. It's easy to blame circumstances, to say, this is just how things are, or I'm being honest. But honesty isn't just acknowledging what's real. It's choosing what to reinforce. And your words do more than describe your world. They design it. Words are not decoration. They are direction. They guide your energy, your decisions, your posture. The man who says, I always figure it out, will behave differently than the man who says, things never go my way. One expects movement. The other expects resistance. Guess which one gets what he expects? The tragedy is that most men curse their own path without knowing it. They start their mornings complaining about how tired they are. They talk to friends about how stuck they feel. They narrate their lives with defeat, limitation, sarcasm, and passivity. Then they ask why motivation disappears, why nothing changes. But success cannot bloom in poisoned soil. You cannot speak weakness all day and expect to walk in strength. You cannot rehearse failure and expect to perform victory. So how do you change? You begin by listening to yourself, not casually, but carefully. Monitor the labels you use. Watch the tone you take when talking about your work, your body, your mind, your future. Do you speak as the man you're becoming or as the man you're trying to escape? It takes discipline to interrupt the habit, but it is necessary because every sentence repeated becomes a belief. Every belief repeated becomes a habit, and every habit repeated becomes identity. Start simple. Replace self-deprecating jokes with declarations of growth. Stop calling yourself broke, lazy, not a morning person. Even if it feels fake, speak what you want to be true. Say, I'm getting stronger. Say, I'm focused. Say, I'm building something great. Not because it's already visible, but because your words